Welcome to the Point Man Podcast. This is a mic'd up men's group of 4 Catholic fathers challenging each other to be the point men for their families.
I am a fighter. I am a fighter.
All right. Welcome to the Point Man Podcast, Season 4, Episode 7, our last episode on authentic masculinity. We're here with our dear friend and guest, Eric Cedor, physical therapist, learning doctor, a great family man, a great and excellent man all around. We'll get into that, but before we do, a quick message from our sponsor.
So we just want to throw a shout out to our partner, Triton Stone. Actually, their website is tritonstonegroup.com, and they operate 32 locations across 17 states. It's a slab and tile galleries and distribution center for kitchen and home remodeling. So I want to just say thank you to our partner, Triton Stone.
If you're doing remodel, check them out. Let's do some check-ins. Jason.
Man, doing well, staying busy, I guess, as always. Trying not to, I think I've been telling everybody that I've been juggling, but really it's more like I feel like I'm dropping most of the time. But just trying
Expensive things you're dropping?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, it can be for sure. But for the most part, I think I'm doing well. Praise God. I will say this, a little humble brag, boast in the Lord. The friends do this, and I took the same kind of initiative. But I got my youngest daughter. We had a coffee yesterday. Well, I got coffee, she got milk, and we split a little. It was a Canadian bacon croissant sandwich. So I was like, that was just that extra little time. Got up in the morning before school. My second oldest brought everybody to school, and had that time together with her. And I was like, man, that was great. But that was an inspiration from somebody that I saw do that for them, for their family. I was like, I want to do that too. So
Another humble brag. We can just zoom in on Jason's socks.
Oh yeah.
We're in Mardi Gras season.
So this is so I gave a talk at Divine Mercy Parish in Kennerborough. So I want to give a little shout out to them. They did a phenomenal job putting together a night for married couples. They had me speak, and this was one of the little gifts they gave me with these little fleur-de-lis socks.
Beautiful.
So
Awesome.
yeah, praise God.
Clint?
They do great work.
Yeah, we're good. We had our Mardi Gras parade in the neighborhood over the weekend, and my daughter was chosen as the queen.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we got to experience a little early Mardi Gras, and I think she really felt special, and she handled it very well as an 11-year-old. But it was a lot of fun, just all of her friends in the neighborhood and getting to participate and build Mardi Gras floats.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was a lot of fun, and all the kids were involved in the parade and stuff like that. So it was a blast.
So being from California, Mardi Gras, outsider, I'm like, man, what is going on here? But the longer I'm in this culture, there is a genius to it.
Yeah.
I mean, just the community coming together on all the different facets and levels. I can't tell how impressed with Mardi Gras I am and the genius behind it. I would love to get into that, but quick check-in. If we're doing humble brags,
yes.
I'm going to go there.
Yeah, go for it.
I know you two gentlemen are doing Exodus 90.
Yeah.
Clint, I don't know. Are you
I'm
doing
not.
it? You're not. I'm not either. But what I am doing in January is bourbons. Hot fires in the evening, bourbon, rosary, family.
Bro.
I'll tell you what, like if Aristotle was sitting next to me at like the family rosary, he'd be like, "This is the good life."
This is how it's supposed
Yeah,
to be.
this is the good life. I mean, there's only like so many weeks you can wear a flannel, in Louisiana.
Very
So I'm
true
taking
that.
advantage of that. Have a fire.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a couple weeks next month we can have some fires, but a little bourbon. I mean, it's good.
It's good.
It's a
Praise
good life.
God.
So that's my humble brag, little check-in. Eric, my man.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, so we haven't had as many fires as I'd like to lately, but yeah, kind of a the light shining on how quickly family life progresses. My oldest is 15 and she's a sophomore. And just last night my wife took her to a little presentation on Ave Maria College.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're talking about college is a little crazy, and reinforcing all the grays that are popping out of my beard. I'm trying to hide it on my head. That's why I kind of go a little short, but
Little short.
But yeah, they were impressed, and so that's a good thing. But I'm really grateful to be here with you guys today.
Yeah, grateful for you to be here with us, man. So I guess a little background here on Eric. A Franciscan grad, like we mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, physical therapist, has a couple doctorates, a learned man, a learned doctor. But what impressed me most, and I'll let you tell your own story here, is just your commitment to family life, your commitment to the faith. And in a lot of ways, I say this as a compliment, like leading a virtuous hidden life. It's always a great gift when we get to see Eric and hang out with Eric, but I mean, you're called to a deep commitment to family life, and I'll let you kind of maybe unpack that. But when I look at authentic masculinity, I mean, you're at the top of that list for a lot of reasons. But and I see you at the gym too. You're always getting after it. There's a strong body over here,
dude.
Like,
He's solid,
dude. On a lot of realms, but I'll just pass you the baton, man. Actually, Jason, you know Eric for a long time now. Maybe you guys go back ways.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have Eric back on to talk more about that because his friendship has been just a gift from the Lord for me in so many ways. In fact, the introduction to the theology of the body came around from our friendship, and then the prayers that I remember praying to when Elise and I were discerning going to the JP2 Institute. You're the one that helped guided me into prayer, into praying a novena for that decision. He's been just a rock for me as a friend, as a man of God, as an example of the witness that I'm called to as a man. So yeah, I could go on. Let me jump in.
Yeah, let's get that scripture
with the scripture passage for the day, because this really ties into what we've been talking about, but also what we will be talking about. And this is 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And it's funny because I think it sounds like maybe Paul's doing a little humble boasting himself. He says, "I will boast, but about myself I will not boast, except about my weaknesses. Although if I wish to boast, I would not be foolish, for I would be telling the truth. But I refrain so that no one may think more of me than what he sees in me or hears from me, because of the abundance of the revelations. Therefore, that I might not become too elated, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, an angel of Satan to beat me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I begged the Lord about this, that it might leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. I will rather boast most gladly of my weaknesses, in order that the power of Christ may dwell with me. Therefore, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and constraints for the sake of Christ, for when I am weak, then I am strong."
Yeah, I mean that's a scripture that's that really personifies a lot of my experience of masculinity and fatherhood. I grew up around here. I went to St. Paul's High School down the road. I got up to Franciscan University. Had a great experience up there. I think I had a pretty solid formation. But there's a lot of life you just don't know till you know, right? Till you start living it. And I think what I've experienced, and I'm going to, share kind of a little more of my journey, but I think God gives us all a gift in that everybody connects. We're all a walking gospel. We all have an opportunity in certain circumstances. As y'all mentioned, I'm a physical therapist, so I get to interact with a lot of people that otherwise I wouldn't interact with unless they were injured or having some type of problem. And you mentioned, my education. I remember when I was finishing, I did a Doctor of Science degree through Texas Tech. I remember I had finished my defense, and I was sitting in front of the panel who was evaluating me, and I was ready for the questions. Now they're going to ask me the questions, and I'm all kind of psyched up. And the first question they hit me with, they said, "Eric, we've watched you do this for 5 years," because it took me 5 years. And we had life challenges. I had to take a pause on it and came back. And they said, "We know that you're a different person. How are you a different person after this?" And I was not expecting that question. And I had to stop and think about it. And the only thing I could say was, I think for the first time in my life, I finally am starting to come to grips with how little I know. And that's been my experience of family life. So I'm married. I have 3 children. I have a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and I have a newly minted 10-year-old. My 15 and 13-year-old, beautiful Reagan and Lily, just wonderful, wonderful girls. Mia, our youngest, she was a very, a typical pregnancy, a little bit we were told measuring smaller, and because my wife was over 35, she was considered an old pregnancy. So we had lots of ultrasound appointments, but there was nothing that really popped out as being abnormal. And then when we had Mia, the delivery process was about as easy as, of course, I'm sitting on the sidelines, right? It was easy for me. All of them were kind of easy for me. But it seemed like it was a much smoother process than the first two, and we're celebrating. And, I remember the family came like 4 hours after initially she was born, and we had some just great pictures, great times. And I remember I walked the family back out, as my parents had Reagan and Lily at that time. And I walked them back out to the car and came back inside to the delivery room. And I recognized one of the nurses. There was another nurse I didn't recognize, and there was another doctor that I did not recognize for sure. And, you go from this, elation, new father, everything's great. And I could see first thing I noticed was my wife's eyes, and in this panic and fear. And it was just such a contrast to what we had just been experiencing. And I'm a very analytical guy. I'm very, I'm a deep thinker to a fault sometimes, but my rational brain just turned off. And I hear the first thing I kind of computed was, you notice she looked a little different from your other children. And I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on here? And then in the process, and I start to notice, I'm like, well, wait a minute, Mia's not even in here. And so what became evident was there was some type of problem. And then, the next thing I kind of computed was, well, no more when the geneticist gets here. I'm like, geneticist? So, and before I could even kind of put my foot down on something solid to try to press off, to push off from, my wife and I are left in this room, and we're just trying to, like, what just happened? And I'm trying to figure out, are we dealing with a life-threatening situation here? Where's Mia? What's going on? And in minutes before we could even, fully process this, there's a knock on the door, and a little bit of a flashback. When I was in high school, I went on a retreat that I didn't really want to go on. Was pursuing a girl that ignored me the whole time, and was the guy in the back of the room. I'm not going to participate, but I had a really clear experience where the Lord just made clear to me in a way that I couldn't walk it back. I stepped across the threshold that I knew He was present in the Eucharist. I knew that. I didn't know it on a cognitive level. It was something. It was a heart knowledge. And so this knock on the door, fast forward, all these years later, and someone leans in the room, would you like to receive the Eucharist? Mm-hmm. So at that moment, that was the darkest moment of my life. Didn't even have a chance to reach out and even call on the Lord, and He physically walked into the room. Wow. So, Mia is, so to kind of give fast forward a little bit, Mia is, she is an incredibly unique young lady. We've had her involved in, there was a diagnostic expansion that they called the Undiagnosed Diseases Network that our geneticist had referred her to. She was managed and studied for about 4 years, and it's like every test you could imagine. And then we were put into this other group, which is, it was a group of 12 universities mediated by Harvard. We were sent to Baylor. We did tissue samples, did blood samples of all of us, the whole family. We did get to stop at Buc-ee's on the way, so that was a highlight. Yeah, that's a win. But after all of that, and after 3 years, we've gotten very minimal information on her. And as a physical therapist, people are like, oh, yeah, you must know a lot about special needs kids and all that. And I got a little bit, but it's not the same as living the experience as a parent. And you realize when you step into that world, there's a whole nother world of parents it's a whole different set of challenges. But there's also just a whole nother set of blessings. The way you mentioned and phrased it, Sam, I don't think anybody's ever said that to me, a hidden life. But that really, and I would say, yeah, it's difficult because I think, and my wife gives me way more credit than I deserve. But when when she tells the story, she said, from day one, Eric hit the ground running and like, this is what we have. We've been blessed with. This is what we're going to do. The reality is more of I was just in terror, So I remember the first night that we got her home. She was in ICU for 6 days. She had some difficulty with feeding. But, I mean, for the most part, nothing really dire. I don't even think she had jaundice. But she would not sleep without being held. So what I realized, God prepares you for things. So my doctor of science program, I finished literally 5 weeks before she was born. The last year and a half, I had been, my schedule was to finish my dissertation. I was working 7 to 5 or 7 to 6. I'd come home, I'd spend a couple hours with the family, then I'd go in my office and I would work and shut it down about 1 or 1:30. And I was doing this for like a year and a half. So I was operating in that state for a long time. So when Mia came along, it's like, oh, she's not going to, and she was one of her characteristics is she's very low tone. So she doesn't have a lot of muscle tone. So couldn't hold me, and being a baby had even less so. So couldn't really sleep without being held upright. So, and that was for the first 6 months of her life. But I had been in this training mode where this was like, well, this is what I do, So I just would, my wife would go to bed, I would stay up with her, and then she would get up and I would get some sleep. And so the Lord prepared us for that. But I think very early on, I recognized this temptation to fear, this temptation to fear what the future was going to be. Are we going to be able to do this? How does this look in a year and in 5 years and 10 years and whatever? How long will she live? If that's something we're going to deal with soon. And I think I really, my faith, I had a good faith formation, but that was really the moment when I just jumped off. And I'm like, okay, God, I can't do this. And I recognize that I can't do this. Sometimes we say God doesn't give us more than we can handle. I think that's false.
Yeah. I
think he often gives us more than we can handle without him being present. Even this morning, you mentioned Exodus. I was reading through where, it's Moses is saying, I can't, what you're calling me to, I can't do. And that was accurate.
Yeah.
What he was being called to as an 80-year-old man, he was not able to do. He was not an orator, not a man of stature. And, a wanted fugitive. But God said, I will be with you.
Yes.
It's not, I'm going to make you stronger. I'm going to make you, no, I know you can't speak. So I'm going to let Aaron speak for you. I'm not going to give you the gift of speech. And that's kind of been the experience, of our life of these 10 years is just, God has just continued to provide, but he doesn't, and it's just amazing because he just provides what we need for the moment. And it's not, not like for a year or 2 years or 3 years. It's very moment to moment.
There's so much to unpack there, but I think one thing I'd love to enter in on is, you just finished this dissertation. So now you're a doctor, that's a huge accomplishment. 5 years of work, burning the midnight oil, leading a family life, holding down a profession. And you're like, hey, this is a big time to celebrate. Look at me, I'm a doctor. But the Lord's like, no, I'm actually using this to prepare you for your vocation, and that setting that tone. But what I also want to highlight is what you said about how Christ meets you right there. That was 5 minutes. You said you didn't have a leg to stand on there to actually getting some traction, understanding the situation and the landscape, and then boom, the Lord encounters you hey, I'm here. I'm seeing you.
Yeah. It reminds me whenever Elise and I were first diagnosed with cancer, and we left the doctor's office and we're trying to make it to the Adoration Chapel to go to him and just pour our hearts out and just to ask for help. And we had one help that we were looking for was that there was a particular doctor that we wanted to get an appointment with, but we knew he was locked up because he was just so popular, and it was going to be really a tough go to get him to be our doctor. But before we could even, it was in Covington, so we're going from one side of Covington into the another side of Covington. Before we could even enter into the Adoration Chapel to go before him in the Lord, he already went before us, and then the lady from the office is calling us, telling us we have an appointment tomorrow, the next day. And so before we could even ask the Lord, he's like, all right, I got you. I know where your heart's at. I know what you need, and I'm going to do that for you. Now come to me and just rest.
Yeah. I think something else I want to maybe highlight to the listeners, because this is something that I have always been impressed about since, you shared your story, was I see you in the gym a lot. And growing up in the teams, that's just part of daily life. You see guys in the gym, and oftentimes that's for work, for the profession, because you carry a lot of heavy equipment and gear, and you need to have that endurance and to sustain you in your profession, and that makes sense. Oftentimes, though, it can become an ego trip. Like, people get jacked. A lot of these individuals have good genes, good genetics. They're inclined to work out, and they're workhorses, and it can kind of get a little bit sideways. And I think that's just across the board in society. People oftentimes want to work out because they know it's good for your health, but then it's just like, look at my biceps, you know? But when I ask you about, like, hey, why are you working out? You're like, dude, I'm doing this because my family needs me to be strong. That like blew me away. So I don't know if you want to just unpack like what that means, because your family life actually, there's a lot involved in terms of like a physical effort.
Yeah, so Mia at 10 years old is just a little bit south of 60 pounds, you know, and she's able to physically, she can kind of scoot herself around, you know, she's able to get her knees and crawl just a bit, but it's a lot of, it's physical. You know, my wife and I are both getting older, you know. I'm not quite to 45, you know, as Jason just reached last week. But yeah, and I mean, that's something, you know, but it's interesting though, because you talk about that. So strength, I mean, as a physical therapist, I'm telling people every day, I mean, we have this need. I mean, people that age well, they have pretty much, what I understand, is two things in common: a good VO2 max, which is your body's efficiency at using oxygen, and also they maintain muscle mass, which is strength. So yeah, I mean, my necessity to be able to, I mean, to lift her up and put her in my truck, you know, that's why I do shoulder press, you know? So, I mean, and there's a beauty there, because I've not always been in that space. A lot of my earlier life was I was trying to find authentic masculinity in that, you know, strength and lifting world. And even went to extremes, and the Lord really had to purify that. And he continues to purify it, because I mean, I'm not all the way there, but it is a great blessing to have Mia, because she does keep that focused, and to have my girls, and to recognize and see, and even my own dad, you know. So, you know, part of the check-in is I've started to kind of learn it. What I feel like I'm really learning is to embrace the fact that the Lord allows suffering in our lives, and he allows it because he's a good father. And being a dad now, and seeing as my girls get older, you know, seeing that there are struggles that they need to go through, that if they don't go through these struggles, they're not going to mature, has really given me a lot of insight. And that's what I've been trying to lean into more. So, you know, I think maybe it was a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. It's a little over a week ago now. You know, my wife was going on a retreat, so Mia is completely dependent. So I mean, a lot of my wife's life is really centered, like you said, small around the house. So she doesn't get to go out. And Mia, as she gets older, she's not very comfortable being out and about in crowds. Loud noises upset her. And there's just an element of it's just difficult. It's physically difficult to bring her out. So a lot of the life is around the house. But anyway, so my wife, we had tried to set up, okay, she's going on a retreat. She hadn't been on a retreat in probably 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's been a while. And so when this came open, we're like, yes, make it happen. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, okay, there's going to be some spiritual warfare. And oftentimes, I mean, it's audiovisual equipment or it's vehicles. I'm like, all right, which one is it going to be? So the night before the retreat, and Mia, one other thing about Mia is that sleeping is a constant battle. Like, we're always trying to get her sleep regulated. So sometimes she'll just wake up in the middle of the night and she's just up. She's ready to go. So there's that element. But my truck had a malfunctioning sensor in the back rear left passenger door, and so the night before the retreat, the alarm goes off, and I go turn it off. About an hour later, alarm goes off again. All right, turn it off. At one point, I'm like in a deep sleep, and then I hear the doorbell ring, and what's going on? So I walk to the front door where the police are at the house, because our neighbors have called, because my alarm is still going off. You know, police were very nice, Covington police, super, super nice at 3 a.m. to me. Come back in, get it. I finally get it turned off, and I'm just panicked it's going to go off again. And then Mia gets up. And But and look, in the past, I really hope the Lord doesn't show me my batting average because it's pretty low. Like my wife is first ballot Hall of Fame for sure.
Yeah.
But my batting average, I wouldn't be in single A. But in that moment, I recognized it for what it was. I just laughed. I'm like, okay, like this is how it's going to go down, and I'm just going to offer this up for my wife, and I embraced it. And then I got Mia situated. I'm like, I got about 20 minutes. And I laid down and the alarm went off again. I'm like, I'm up. So I spent the extra time in prayer. She was able to go on the retreat. And then we had the van went out. So actually my dad brought me here this morning. But there's I think that's the secret that, we're told that if you're doing things right, if you're living right, you're not going to have problems. You're not going to have suffering. And it's just not true.
The Lord didn't say that.
He didn't say that. But somehow I think even as Christians, we get that idea that it's like, well, if I'm living a good life, I'm going to be blessed. And we are blessed, but it's more often, it's actually the suffering that blesses us in deeper, more substantial ways. And that's just a mystery.
I mean, how much have we learned through our faults and failures that the Lord is guiding us through those moments? It's just an exercise. You don't go in there like, if you go in there and work out and you're like, man, I was like, this water was coming off it was like I was sweating, I think, and then like my muscles are hurting. Like, bro, you're working out. That's what it's supposed to look like. It's like
I was uncomfortable. I'm never going to do that again.
Right, exactly. That was hard. Like It's like this whole thing about our Lord telling us, pick up your cross and follow me, not pick up your throw pillow and follow me. It's the road is narrow that leads to everlasting life, and it's hard. And that's the thing that we need to embrace. That we need to prepare ourselves for the battle that we're in, for the attack that the enemy is surrounding and trying to take us down.
I agree with both of you, but I think just to maybe a disclaimer or maybe laying some foundation here is that in order to get to that perspective, though, I think you both have experienced the Father's love. There's that stability and there's that understanding that, okay, I'm loved, and now He's calling me into a deeper relationship. I think we look at Western culture today, they don't have that experience of fatherhood.
Yeah.
And so it's now they're encountering suffering, and they have that from an orphan mentality, and they're angry. And it's hard to embrace suffering, and especially in America, it's all about being the individualist, being at the top of the heap, power, money. Like suffering is something we want to keep very far away.
Yeah.
But if you understand the Father's love, it changes everything.
It's so important to understand. If you're trying to achieve great things, there's going to be barriers. Mm-hmm. Even when you're trying to just live out your daily life, there's going to be barriers. There's going to be attacks from the devil. And I think that keeps a lot of people from living a spiritual life, is that they don't understand that concept that there is going to be suffering. A friend of mine had a very traumatic experience with one of their children at birth, and I think that has kept them from entering in. They feel, I guess, smited by God in a matter of speaking. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I just think that's really important to understand for the listener, is that there is going to be pain and suffering, but that shouldn't keep you from entering into a spiritual life.
Nor does it mean you're not loved. In fact, that's part of the maturity of it. And if you look at fatherhood, my children love it when I acknowledge them. They see me, and I say, "Hey, you did a great job in sports." They probably would admit to this, but they also love the fact that there's a steady hand saying, "Hey, man, we don't act like that."
Yeah.
There's that left and right limit, because part of that is they want to step into manhood.
Yeah.
And my daughter eventually wants to step into womanhood, and my wife and I are called to guide our children, into that direction. And part of that is saying, hey, here's a little bit more weight. This is how we step into these roles. And if there's sweating or muscles are aching involved in that movement,
and
that's mature growth.
The enemy, right? His lie is to twist that way of the cross as something that we should be rejecting. Like Satan has made us think in the world today to avoid suffering, to be suspicious of God's motives and his actions, because if he really loved you, he would never make you suffer the way that he made you suffer. And then you're like, well, what happened to his son, right? How far did that suffering go for him? But then what ended up happening through that suffering? So it really requires us to be, as sharp, wise as serpents and innocent as doves. We've got to be trusting into the Father who loves us. He's a good Father. That was good. That goes back to the Adam and Eve in the garden. I think it all boils down so much to is, do you trust me?
Yep.
Do you trust me? Do you trust me with your pain? Do you trust me with your problems? Do you trust me that I'm with you always to the end of the age?
And the most authentic masculine figure that we can look to is the second person of the Trinity, Jesus Christ, who is his arms outstretched on the cross, giving everything. And I think we're duping ourselves if we don't realize that that's where the spiritual life is leading us, is ultimately to the cross and to give everything, because Christ is clear, like you have to die. So the he wants happy sons and daughters. Like God the Father wants happy sons and daughters. He does. But part of that is to live in fullness with him. And so we have to put the old self to death. And the old man dies hard. Yeah. I'm still wrestling the old man.
Yeah.
I think it's, Clint, to your point about you have a traumatic experience like that, and there's that fear, okay, if I draw near to the Lord, that means it's gonna be rough. And we still deal with that. I deal with that off and on. And I mean, the difference is I talk to him about it. I say, Lord, I don't trust you in this. I know you're good. I want to trust you, but this is hard. Like I know I'm probably going to outlive my daughter. How long that is, I don't know. But and also to your point, Sam, I think that is so key. And this isn't a long enough show, but about a year and a half ago, we thought we had been wrestling. We're kind of at the edge of what we're going to do. And then I had a major back injury that caused me to think about, surgery. Was having, nerve issues in my leg. And then Mia developed epilepsy. So we had a couple of major seizures. The first one that almost killed her. But I shared for this point because in the middle of that, she had her first, it's like the thing you visualize as a dad. You never want to get that call of your wife panicked and, you're racing to the house and the paramedics are going to the house. And I got to experience that. I was literally on the phone between patients. I had a cancellation, sharing with this person about some of the struggles. And then, my wife beeps in and, I'm flying home. And it was bad. I mean, that was probably that was a worse day than Mia's birth and navigating that. And it ended up being like a 48-hour thing. We were in the ER for 5 or 6 hours. She started to come out of it. We came home. We were home for an hour. We just got her down, and she started going again. Went back to the hospital, and then I was there for it was like a 48-hour period. And at the end of it, it says started on Friday afternoon. It was a Sunday morning, and I mean that the night before. And she's so small, and they didn't have a regular. She sleeps in a bed that have high elevated walls, so that she can't get out because she wouldn't know if she could just throw herself out. So I was panicked she was going to roll out of this big bed. So I laid with her the whole night. I mean, so I didn't sleep. But at the end of all this, I mean, I was exhausted. I was spent, and she's finally resting peacefully. And it's like 5:36 in the morning. The sun's coming up over the hospital. And the only thing I felt was gratitude. And I was sitting there, and it was just such a strange thing because it wasn't, like I should be thankful for this pair of socks I got, or my wife tells the girls this, if they give you broccoli, how are you going to be thankful? It's like I should be thankful for this. But that was the only thing that came forth from the pit of my soul was gratitude. And I just said, Lord, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to have just gone through this. And my wife sometimes will call me our cuddly cross, but it was like in that moment I realized it's like she's carrying the cross. Yeah. Like I'm Simon, she's carrying the cross. Like how blind have I been to this? And it was just this gratitude that I get to do this with this little girl who is a saint. Yes. Walking this earth. And in that moment, and this is like the deepest desire in my heart. I don't know if y'all get down to this, but when it comes down to it, like when I'm really honest with the Lord, I say, Lord, how am I doing? I just want to know how I'm doing. Because sometimes I wonder how I'm doing as a husband, as
Do you
a father.
ever get a response?
Yeah.
Well,
what does he say?
in this moment, I am not a mystic, guys. I don't hear voices. I haven't seen visions, but I mean, the Father spoke into my heart. I am so proud of you. And I felt this thing that, I mean, I've read about it. The saints have experienced it, and I'm not a saint. But I felt this overwhelming love that if I would have sat in that for more than a couple of more seconds, I think I would have died. Like, I felt like my heart was going to explode. And it was so intense. And I mean, in that moment, again, I just recognized there's just this weird connection between suffering and the cross and the Father's love and joy. And I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, heaven is real.
Yeah.
The Lord's love is real. And in my life to date, that's the most intense experience of God loves I've ever had. And again, that was the darkest moment where I was empty. I had nothing left. And I mean, guys, I gripe when I, get a couple. I used to be so, I didn't get my sleep, I need my sleep. And the Lord's like, okay. And what I've realized is that you're the God of the universe. If you need me to go without sleep, like, that's nothing. I can do that. But again, don't ask him for my batting average. Again, my wife is the one. But even praise God, I got an opportunity this morning to do it again because she got up at about 4:20 or so, a little earlier than I was planning to get up. But and I was sitting there. I'm like, all right, am I getting up this time? My wife's like, I got it. I'm getting up 40 minutes anyway.
Yeah.
Well, how is your relationship with Mia impacted just overall your fatherhood? I mean, I'd like to go there a little bit. I don't know the question asked, but I really want to unpack this sense of fatherhood. One, in your life, but also you start mentioning the love of the Father. I mean, I would love for you to kind of maybe unpack a little bit more, just say more on that topic.
Yeah, so I mean, Mia is, for most of her life, she is very happy. I mean, praise God. Again, when you step into the special needs world, there are children that, I mean, just flat affect, that are just not able to express themselves. And we know some families like that, I mean, they really are not able to give much back to their parents in the way of, affirmation. Mia has a great laugh.
She does.
And she's, one of her favorite things to do is to rip my glasses off. And she loves to grab my throat and try to rip my throat off. And, and she but I mean, just the laugh and the beauty of that. But yeah, our interactions and the fact that she's, she has always been and always will be completely dependent, but she's also, in that element, she's an icon of trust. She completely trusts my wife and I, and there's just such, again, a beauty and a responsibility and a gift. It's been beautiful to watch, my older two girls, and it's because you mentioned the kind of the hidden life, because we were never going to be a travel sports team. We were never going to be a family that was able to do a lot with, a lot of our friends have many kids, and Mia hasn't been immunocompromised, but she's been earlier in her life pretty susceptible to illness, and whenever she would get sick, it just made an already difficult situation much more difficult because she didn't want to drink, she didn't want to eat. She was borderline failure to thrive. We eventually, with the seizures, we had to decide to put a Mickey button in, which enables us to put the medicine directly in through a tube, which has been, by the way, a great gift for anybody that's, maybe listening and feeling that, because my wife and I felt a little bit like failures by going into that, but that's been an incredible blessing that we didn't see coming. But watching my girls, and they're, entering into this space of just, they are very involved in the care of their sister every day. And what a formation. My wife calls it the school of compassion. And so much of who they are has very little to do with, I say myself, but my wife and this interaction with this beautiful little girl that just, she just calls forth, and that's the gift. And I hope if people take nothing else from this, it's that, having a child with challenges is very difficult. You're walking around with your heart kind of partially open. Mia's not able to speak, so I can't have a conversation with her. There's so many things I wish I could explain to her. She doesn't understand yes and no. So there is a little bit of that, your heart is always kind of, I identify with that. It's not the same, but it's helpful to know that Christ kept that wound in his side, right? So there's a little bit of a wound that I carry with me. But what I've realized is part of, I think, Nicole and I's vocation as a married couple is to be able to just witness to, it's also a beautiful life. It's simultaneously very painful and also incredibly joyful. I mean, we would never want somebody to see our family and say, oh, wow, I'm so glad I don't have to carry that, because there's so many gifts. So, for example, Mia just loves random noises. So we figured out we feed her in front of one of the kitchen counters, and she has access to the silverware drawer, which is, we have to be careful, right? Because she'll put everything, she explores everything, her whole world with her mouth. So, make sure she doesn't grab a knife. But she loves to pull open that drawer and slam it and just listen to the silverware. And she takes such delight in it. And it's just, it's one of those things that people, how many times have you slammed a silverware drawer and oh man, I really did that, but nothing. But for her, it's just hilarious, and things that she finds funny. We just, it's we know for seeing the world through the eyes of a child is so beautiful. Seeing the world through her eyes is even, it's just more interesting. There's so many things that we just take for granted that are just, she just receives it with new eyes and with wonder.
What's the biggest thing that you've learned in the spiritual life, being Mia's father? Just being a father in general. That's
a big question. I think it's just God provides. He is the author of fatherhood, and he loves us very intentionally, and he meets us where we are. Again, I've had, because it's difficult so in the physical therapy world, we have a phrase we'll say sometimes: injuries happen in the fourth quarter. Because in the fourth quarter, number one, it's when the game's won and lost, but that's when your conditioning is going to it's going to be shown. Are you able to, because movement quality decays as somebody fatigues. So how many of us, I think a lot of guys that I know, I know myself, the fourth quarter is walking. It starts when you walk from your vehicle into the house. And I've had so many years where I've, so many episodes of, I can see it. I'd walk in the house, and with a look or with a couple of words, I could detonate everybody's day, like throw the flash bomb in there, and everything is now in chaos. And the humility of recognizing that, I'm being, my specific vocation is I'm working all day. I'm more of a kind of an introverted temperament. I'm talking to people all day long who are for the most part complaining to me. And so then I'm going to come home, and the time that it's like, okay, this is my time. It's like, no, this is when my wife needs me to step in. Now, I've had to learn both humility, because there's moments, and my wife knows me better than I know myself, where she can see, yes, I know you want to come help feed Mia right now, but I need you to sit down and eat. Yes, ma'am. And there's other days when I walk in and I feel that grace, and I can see that she's having a rough day, and I got it. Hey, go sit down, go take a bath. I got it. And it's a give and take there. So I think it's just learning the dependence and recognizing that, there's not every day I'm not going to hit it out of the park, but I've really learned to lean on God's mercy. I think that's what I've really learned more than anything, because I know I'm going to mess up. On my best day, I'm going to mess up. When I have the best of intentions, I'm going to have days where I love changing her diaper and she's kicking me in the face and it kind of hurts, or there's going to be days I'm going to spike that diaper into the floor. There's days when I wish things were otherwise, that I wish she could run, and that I wish, that she was wearing the dress for First Communion, which is sensitive to my wife's heart, so it's all of it is mysteriously good. And that's the hope. And I was thinking about this the other day, because I think it was just around thinking about an old, a heartbreak that I had. I can't remember who I was talking, maybe one of my girls or something, of a girl I thought I was going to marry, and how that didn't pan out. But then I thought to myself, well, if that didn't happen, then, I wouldn't have met your mom. I wouldn't have, you wouldn't exist. Lily wouldn't exist. Mia would exist. And I can't even imagine that. Like, those great gifts would not have occurred And I think that's really the hope is trusting that the Father is intentional in this mystery. And that's probably, I mean, that could be a season, but the permissive will of God, you know, the things that he allows. And, you know, because again, after this is not to go too far, but after the seizure episode, you know, I have that transfiguration moment. And then a few months later, we're on vacation and I have a fall from 5.5 feet, sustain a grade 5 kidney laceration. And that ended up being 3 months out of work and just, you know, so there's a lot of opportunities to say, hey, God, you know what? I don't need you. I'm trying. And I mean, conversations literally that I've had with the Lord, I'm just trying to do your will. And you are smiting me, you know, where
are you at with the fall? I know last time we talked, you're like, it's still raw. I'm not in a spot to talk about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was, I don't know. And I've Father Michael, who y'all had on before, is also, I know he's a spiritual director to a lot of us, but I remember he told me one time, he says, you know, you do a lot better when you understand and kind of can wrap your mind around a why.
Analytical.
So, you know, I've wrestled with that and I've tried, it's like I want to know a why, but at the same time, I think I've started to recognize that the big fruit of it is that I'm starting to see all the little daily crosses, you know, whatever it is, as an invitation. And then I'm really doing my best to run towards it the best I can. And recognizing that when I do that, everybody around me just does so much better, you know, and it actually is not as heavy. And you mentioned Exodus, and he's going full in Exodus. I'm doing like a partial, but the one thing that I am doing is continuing to do the cold shower. So a cold shower in the morning, right? I mean, it's kind of vogue right now for some people, you know, like on Joe Rogan podcast or whatever, all this stuff, the health benefits. But for me, what I've realized is it helps you to condition yourself to move towards things that are uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah, which is, I think, a lot of what we're called to as men. And then you get to have moments like, so again, Jason and I've talked about this. You think you've, you know, you're hitting it out of the park with your kids, and then they'll tell you something like, yeah, well, meh, you know, or they'll actually, yeah, it was actually pretty terrible. I thought, you know, you thought you set up this beautiful day or event and nobody's into it, and it's just it's a total failure, and you've spent all this time. And then so the validation, when you get validation from how much that means. So my wife came back from the retreat, and this was totally unprompted. I mean, sometimes, yeah, I might slip my girls a fire. Hey, tell mom how great you know, so this time it was totally unprompted. And she told my wife, you know, at the end of this retreat, you know, wow, mom, we had just the best weekend we've had in a long time. And there was a lot of difficulties on the weekend, you know, because it's those weekends. It's like, okay, I've worked all week. Now's my time. Well, now it's like, I'm actually going to, and all I did was I was able to lean into all the inconveniences and the sufferings, and I was able to be present to them. And that's not, hey, look at me, guys. Hey, wow. It's like, wow, what a grace. Because I recognize, because the Lord then sometimes won't give me the grace. And then I'm having a spike the diaper moment. I'm realizing, okay, wow, this really is your mercy. But he's present and he's good. And family life is so good, and marriage is so good. And it's because we're gonna wrestle. And that's the thing, I think, is the little untruth that we're slipped in sometimes. We believe is like, wow, yeah, it's if you're doing the right thing, you're not gonna have difficulty. It's like, well, no, everybody has difficulty. Everybody suffers. Anything, we all know this intuitively. Mm-hmm. Nobody goes to these teams going to the Super Bowl. Nobody makes it to the Super Bowl. I mean, all the suffering we don't see, the hidden life of these guys to reach this point. I mean, we don't see, but that's what bears that out. But yeah, just a gift. I mean, just a gift of, and I really do think that's important to underscore, Sam, what you're saying. It's like, it's the Father's love, because there are people that have not had that experience, and you know, to dovetail it into kind of, you know, to finish on this little point with my own dad, you know, I've come to receive car difficulties, which are oftentimes very frustrating, right? Because you know, you're without a car, you're dependent on somebody else, but usually what I've come to receive it now is like, okay, Lord, you need me to spend some time with my dad, because it's my dad that usually brings me to work. And so it's been the last, you know, 7 or 8 days, you know, to and from work. And I was able to just, okay, this is time with my dad, Lord, you're giving me. And just conversations, you know, we're navigating some difficulties as my mom ages and different things. And being able to be present to him, and that's a whole nother long story, but his own upbringing and wounds, father wounds, but the healing that the Lord's working, but because I was able to say, okay, Lord, this is an opportunity you're giving me with my wife's van almost blowing up and having a major oil leak. Like, this is a gift.
Yeah.
Like, this is a gift. And I think that's what I'm just maybe starting to wrap my arms around a little bit more from having that experience of the fall. Because, it was three things in a relatively short amount of time: serious back injury, epilepsy, and then this fall. I'm like, Lord, all I want to do is take care of my family. I'm not living a morally corrupt life. I mean, this is my focus, and this is how I'm going to be rewarded.
It's funny, like, when that was going down, I, on the sidelines, immediately realized, like, oh man, this guy is living the life, and I remember I had a talk coming up, and I was like, Eric, can you please pray? Because whenever I see suffering like that, I realize someone is really walking close with the Lord.
That's right.
And I appreciate the prayers, man, and the intercession. What's coming up for you, Jason and Clint?
The thing that sticks out for me right now is just the your prayer life, your interior life that you have with the Lord, that you wrestle with him, that you're constantly turning to him. That's a very important part of your day, to make sure that is something that is not put aside. It's not compromised. Like, you really focus in on that. That's a very sacred space for your day, to then be able to help you to experience that relationship and know that love of the Father, and enter into that place where you can process and understand things, maybe not necessarily like in the intellectual, like wrapping your brain around it, but allowing the Lord to wrap his heart around you and walk with you through these things. I think that's the thing, is that, like, to understand that, like, the Lord loves each one of us more than we can possibly imagine. And that the Lord is inviting each one of us to enter into that space of intimacy with him, to experience his love, to experience that trust that we can walk in his ways, and that even when the night is dark, that he is a lamp unto our feet. And even when there's the prowl of the lion, he is that shepherd ready to destroy with his rod and staff the enemy that comes to take us down. That we can see that, like, he is a good father in the sufferings, because he is at work. Like you said, like, Lord, like I'm trying to do my thing, right? Like, why are you doing this? I mean, the Lord's probably saying, Eric, I'm trying to do my thing. Why don't you let me love you and guide you? Because it's going to be through this that you're going to draw closer to me, that you're going to receive more of my grace, that you're going to be a brighter light unto the world of my love and my love for you and my love for the whole world.
And that's where I heard Chris Stefanik say, sometimes we think being a Christian is, I'm loving God well. He said it's actually flipped. Being a good Christian is receiving God's love well. Yeah. Which is oftentimes harder.
And it's hard. You're like, what it doesn't make sense. But that come back to, I love St. Peter. It's St. Peter's, it's John chapter 6. He's the bread of life discourse, and these disciples and these apostles are all in the room. And then he says, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. And then all of a sudden, these disciples who've been watching these miracles, been with the Lord, are like, okay, bounce, I'm out. This is just crazy talk. And they're leaving. And then he doesn't he doesn't excuse himself. He double downs on those words, like, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. They all walk except for the 12. And then Jesus turns to the 12 and says, are you going to leave me too? And then Peter says these beautiful words, like, look, where else would we go? Like, you have the words of eternal life. And I feel like I'm understanding those words as like, look, I don't understand. I have no idea, but I know I'm going to trust you that this is going to make sense at some point. And that's kind of, I think, our position sometimes, is that, like, we know what the Lord has done, to remember the things that the Lord has done for us, to remember his presence in our life, and to be cognitive of that, to recollect, to remember those moments, and to let those things remind us of that presence that God is even in our storms, and to be wrapped up, not in to be able to detail out the storm that's around you, but to be impressed and be in love with the God who stands before us in the storm, calling us to walk on water. As Peter did, until he turned his gaze away.
Yeah. Well, you, man, what's coming up, Clint?
I was just thinking, I love the comparison you made about, the fourth quarter begins when you're getting out of your car in the evening and you're going into the house. And, that it's important that you're giving your best energy to your family, not your fourth quarter energy.
Yeah.
And man, how often do I come home and I'm running on fumes.
Get me a beer.
Yeah. But, and I have a tendency to be negative. Like you said, a look or some ill words, I can just set off the whole evening. And I want to carry that with me. I like that analogy that, you get hurt in the fourth quarter, but, through conditioning and muscular endurance, you still have good energy at the end of the day. That's just, to me, I feel like that's so important, that so many of us men, we get home in the evening, like you said, give me a beer, it's my time. But that's really when you need to be most focused and most conditioned to give the best to your family. I love that.
Yeah. I love it too, man. I love how you said the conditioning, because you mentioned, like, look, I still spike the diaper sometimes, this sense of like, it's not perfect, but it's a journey. And then the goal is to just keep getting better, to be aware, to recognize. I think that's huge. But also I want to highlight just the suffering piece and how those gifts, those come from that suffering. And just in reflection, like when I got out, I guess 2 years before I got out of the military, I was in my mid 30s and I had a hip surgery and back surgery. And so my folks came out to help with the kids because I was laid up for 6 weeks. And I remember probably 3 weeks into it, I could take a shower. And so my wife can't lift. I'm like, she's not going to take me to the shower. So my dad's like, I got you. And it was so humbling because here I am, like I prior to that surgery, a year earlier, I had been a troop commander, charged 3 platoons, and here I am naked, and my old man has to help me take a shower, and I'm embarrassed, no, I got. He's like, you can't stand, you just had hip surgery, I got you, man, it's all right, son, I got you. And just to be reliant on the Father, it was just vulnerable, naked, broken, and he's I holding me, literally holding me up, and at the same time, I remember, maybe a day later, I can't do anything. I'm just on this bed, and I'm my legs in this machine, and my mom gives me a cup of coffee, and when it's time to sit up, and my oldest son comes in. And he was little at the time. He's like, Daddy, he's so pumped to see me. And he, on accident, knocks over the coffee, and it hot coffee's everywhere. The glass shatters, and I can't pick it up, and I can't I'm not angry. And he's upset that I'm gonna be upset, and I'm like, nah, it's all right, man. It's all good. And my dad just comes in. He's like, what's going on? I was like, well, there's coffee all over the place. There's broken. Ceramic. He's like, all right, no worries. Just cleans it up. And I remember when he left, I felt like God the Father just spoke to my heart saying, look, I clean up messes like this. It's not a big deal for me. I'm not anxious about messes. Yeah. And I've tried to hold that with me as I journey through life. We're going to encounter suffering. We're going to encounter messes. And oftentimes you're like, how am I going to fix this? And the Lord's like, you're not. I'm going to. I'm going to. And those moments, they're like precious jewels that I just hold on to. But I would not have had them if I hadn't had the opportunity to suffer. Yeah. And to be in a state where I literally couldn't do anything. And I think I'm not advocating for. We're called to move and to leverage our gifts and our talents the Lord's given to us for His glory. But I think there's a deep truth in the spiritual life, and again, I'm in deep water sharing this because I don't know it, but there is a deep truth that part of the spiritual life is just being able to receive love.
Yes. Yeah.
And and that you have to get to that space like St. Peter got to. I think we're all going to get there, and that's really a mercy to reach that point where you're, well, where else am I going to go? Mm-hmm. This sucks. This hurts. I know you're good, but I'm questioning it, and I have good reason to question it, but I know you're good. And Jason, like you mentioned, prayer. So, prayer used to be something I aspired to. Now it's just something it's I have to do. Mm-hmm. My wife and I don't know the statistics, but early on, she was researching these things. I don't know if this is a little bit a part of the trepidation and fear, but the divorce statistics on special needs families and where the man leaves is very high. Is very high. And you can see why. Marriage, if anybody's been married for longer than a day, they know that your selfishness is going to become very evident pretty quickly. So the fact that people can sustain marriages for a lifetime is miraculous. You put on top of that the demands of, I mean, children are difficult anyway, but to have a child that's completely dependent and always will be is daunting. And so that we quickly, so we have 2 negotiables, and maybe this is my last thing I think is really important that I'll share is the 2 non-negotiables for my wife and I are our individual time with the Lord, our prayer time, and then our prayer time together. And our prayer time together, we know that, Jason, you do the Woodwoods ministry, and we've been blessed to be a part of that in some circumstance and to give some talks. But this is kind of the thing we always end on. It's like, look, it doesn't have to be something fancy, but for our family, it looks like, Mia's feeding takes about an hour and 15 minutes. One of the things I had to die to, I love family dinners, but all of us sitting at the table is just not a reality for our family. So that's part of my, my gold, frankincense, or myrrh I can give the Lord, but I've had to let that go. But and I stole that from Father Michael, by the way. Shout out to Father Michael. But after that, we put her in a stander because she can't weight bear. We're trying to make sure her bones develop as much as possible in her hip sockets. So our hips, we don't think about them developing because when we walk, that's what deepens the socket and creates that congruency. Well, people that don't bear weight, they don't develop that. So their likelihood of having a dislocation of their hip as they get bigger and older is pretty high. So we put her in a stander. It looks like a torture device, but it doesn't seem to bother her that much. But we stand her up, put her in her abduction stander, and that's when my wife and I, we do our prayer time. And it's very simple. Some days it's literally, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, all right, Lord, here we are. And we don't have much, We usually read a scripture or something just because it's just good to read the word of the Lord out loud. It's just good. And you don't have to have some deep connection with it. It's just powerful. And then we share, and I'm able to listen to her. She's able to listen to me. And it's just a consistent touch point in our day that has been so many things. Like, I'll give you an example. I am not the best at noticing my wife's beauty. That is a weakness that I have. And, in years past, y'all may have had a similar experience at some point. Your wife gets a haircut or she gets a new dress, and she's looking for you to notice that and to validate that. But there's a window of time to be able to notice this, right? And if you miss the window, game over. No, but in all seriousness, it's like, okay, that was an opportunity that was missed. And that was a source of a lot of tension in our marriage for a long time. But what I recognized was that as we spent more of this time together, number one, I was noticing more, but number two, she wasn't as sensitive to it. So little things like that were, decades of difficulty in our marriage, a sticking point that, no matter if sticky notes or reminders I set myself wouldn't make the difference. Now that we're having this interaction, like, we're both moving towards each other in this space. And that's just been my experience of that. So, I can't, anybody that's married, I think it's not an optional suggestion. It's like, if you want a marriage that's going to survive and actually thrive, Amen. I know where my wife's heart is. I know what she's nervous about right now. I know what she's excited about right now. I haven't always been able to say that because I'm as distracted as anybody, by life and by everything else. But having that space, the Lord comes into it, and then I'm able to actually see her. She's able actually to see me. It doesn't mean we don't have fights. Some days our prayer time is literally, hey, you're kind of being a jerk, and it's mainly her to me.
But what's the prayer?
But then it's we, inviting the Lord in, and then we round the corner. Like, that's the thing that was so shocking me. Like, man, certain things that would last for days or like a week, where you've got this thing hanging over the house. It's like in a matter of minutes or hours, it's over, and like you're waiting for the shoe to drop. It's like, wait a minute, but that's grace, and I think that's the thing that sells the Christian life, right? Yeah, you have the suffering, but everybody's got the suffering. Everybody does. but we suffer with meaning and with purpose, and our suffering actually develops strength and matures us, helps us to recognize all the goodness around us. We're not called to be eternally happy in this life. We're given the gift of reasonable happiness. But that reasonable happiness, my experience of life has been just way richer, way richer. I enjoy the little things.
And it's that suffering that brings us into a deeper intimacy with the Lord, that I think that since his suffering, he rewrote the book on it, which then allows us this opportunity to draw closer to him, to be. And that's why, Sam, you reached out to him in his pain, because you knew that, like St. Paul talked about, my pain is made perfect, right? That he can surrender his sufferings to the Lord and allow that to be united to the Lord's suffering. It becomes redemptive. And so then literally you can offer it up, because why? Because you have this, not just like a pain, but you have this place, this privileged place next to the Lord in that moment. And that's the thing that it comes back to, is just like how much the Lord is using this to draw us closer to him, so that we can be with him for all eternity in heaven. That's the game plan. That's the end plan, the end game. And we got to keep our focus on that.
Well, this has been awesome. I think you're just been an excellent guest for the last episode of the season on authentic masculinity. I got a ton out of this. I really appreciate you being here, Eric and Sharon. I think maybe just go around with tactics takeaway. And again, thank you, man, for showing up. Jason?
Yeah, again, just the importance, when I hear the journey that you've gone through and knowing it so well, just the fact that just your prayer life is just is the fruit of like the Lord working through that, which is a grace. It's asking the Lord for that grace to hold that prayer line, to be able to be intimate with the Lord in prayer daily, and with your wife. Like that is so fruitful, to be able to see his hand, to see his love, to know and to experience all that you're going through, that you're not alone. And that's something that is what the Lord wants for all of us, to know his love and to experience his goodness. But we can't if we allow so many distractions to pull us away from that intimacy that he wants for us.
For me, just a couple things. First of all, I think I'm going to ask Jason to start coming over to my house and reading the Bible to me and my family. The Bible verse was awesome.
Oh, praise God.
And you just do such a great job.
Oh, glory to God.
So I appreciate that. But yeah, Eric, man, I really didn't know a lot about your personal story. And man, I feel like this has been a really awesome episode. And man, there's just the way you speak and describe. I didn't even fully understood what you meant, Sam, by talking about like the hidden life and just devoting your life to your faith in Christ, and just what an amazing story. I think a lot of people in your shoes are not even can begin to be as grateful and just as blessed as you describe. And it's really inspiring and just awesome. So thank you very much. Yeah. Appreciate that.
I have a lot. I guess I would just limit to two. Is I really love the reflection that you see Mia as the saint, as the one carrying the cross. I think that's just a beautiful insight. I think your reflections on suffering were tremendous, but I think what I really want to highlight too is just as your brothers at the parish, just knowing that we see you and you're an inspiration to us. I know that we're not out there like patting you on the back, but just your dedication to the faith, living the sacramental life, living a focused life on your family. It's inspiring and beautiful when we see it. So,
amen. Thank you very much. That means a lot.
Well, thank you for listening to the Point Man podcast. God bless. Have a good one.
Man, what another great show today. I want to thank all of our listeners for spending the time with us. I want to challenge you, if you've enjoyed this, please share this show with another husband or father that you know, or leave us a review on Google, Apple, or Spotify. We'll see you next time.
I was born a fighter. I rise up like smoke from a gun, like a brand new sun.